Welcome to the Scottish Paranormal Podcast. I'm your host Chris, and we'll be delving into the multitude of strange occurrences that happen within Scotland. Please contact us with your accounts at the Scottish Paranormal Podcast at gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube, and feel free to contact us by either means. If you like the episodes or the podcast, please share it with your friends and family to help us grow. Join us on the journey and let's see what's out there. In this episode, we're on location in Armadale West Lothian with Andrew, recounting his encounter with black triangular shaped UFO back in the 90s. This is one of the most prominent UFO cases in Scotland to date, and well worth a listen. Here we Andrew to go through his encounter that happened in, was it 94?
August 94, aye.
94. This is his account, so if you want to just start off with right for the start, for what happened
Sure.
On that evening.
Sure. Be about 11:15, we just came back from Cowdenbeath, and we were having quite a spectacular lightning storm. And at the time, coming back to Armadale, decided to stop up at Armadale Academy to watch the storm. And to the left of me, I kind of noticed something.
What kind of tiny night was that?
This would be about 11:15 night.
11:15 at night. Aye.
So see, I was on the academy playing fields.
So was that right up the back fields? So you're on the back fields of the academy, and you're looking
fields.
over. You can see, like, just for the audio, for the academy, you look over. It's like just the mossland. So it's like lot of fields, some trees, stuff like that. Quite a lot of barn land through there.
So I was watching this lightning storm, and I had caught in my eye what looked like some kind of a dark object, which looked like it was kind of hovering behind the tree line. I watched this for a few minutes and I thought, I'm going to see if I can get a closer look at that. I came along this road, which is known as the Northrig Road, the back road between Armadale and Blackridge. And as I was just travelling along the road quite slow, looking for this dark object, I don't know if it was the same object or a different one, had approached from my right, really low and really silent, just above the tree line of where we're standing now. I braked really hard because this thing was so low I thought I was going to run into it, and I watched this thing just silently glide across maybe 100 metres into the field, and it just stopped, possibly maybe say 15 feet above the ground. I sat in my car watching this thing for a few minutes.
Can I go back just before we go any further? When you seen it at the start, when you seen an object for the academy, if you basically kind of arm's length, what kind of size would you say it was? Was it quite far in the distance, or how far?
It was
would
quite
you say
far.
it was
When I was at the academy and I was watching this thing, as I say, I just caught a glimpse of this at the corner of my eye. My original thought was it was a plane that was coming down, because it didn't look big, because of the distance. It didn't look like a big object. So that's just thinking to myself, something's landing in the field.
Did it look?
And that's how I had to come and have a bit of look.
Was it just an outline of it, or was
it was just like a because it was obviously 11:15 at night. It was quite dark. But it was a summer's night. You could still see, it was the sky was bright, and you just caught this dark object just at the corner of my eye. That's when I initially thought, there's something up there just above the tree line at the academy.
So that's probably the distance for, just for people listening audio wise. So the distance for the academy going through the back to the Northrig Road, it's probably about a mile or something like that, maybe less than that, or is it a bit more than that?
I would say probably from the academy, I would say maybe was standing at the academy, the tree line. I thought this object was at the tree line of the academy.
Ah, right.
You see, and I'm thinking whatever this is coming into the playing fields. It's going to crash land in the playing fields at the academy. This is where I suspect there was the possibility that there was a second object.
Ah, right. Was it? So when you were saying it was at the tree line, was it high up in the sky, or was it?
No, it was just above.
Above the tree. Were you looking at the tree line?
Just above. You remember? Chris, you remember Armadale Academy?
Aye.
Before they built the new school, you had the playing fields at the top.
And it was surrounded by like kind of fir trees.
They're still there, actually.
Still there, right.
So I'm standing at the side of my car on the verge of the playing fields.
Aye.
And the tree line is 400 yards from me, maybe.
Right, okay.
And I'm thinking this thing's coming across this tree line into the playing fields. But it didn't. It was obviously just kind of a hover. Further, just behind the tree line at the academy. Looked like it was coming in to land.
Did it have any lights in that?
Nothing.
Like that? Just a shape.
Nothing. Just a shape. It was totally silent.
So then, when you seen it at the academy, could you discern a shape for it or anything like that?
No, really. It looked quite square, maybe rectangular, but it was angular rather than. The classics, people say that the UFOs maybe like a flying saucer or something. It wasn't a saucer shaped thing. It was more, say, rectangular.
Aye.
When I first saw it, and as I say, really black, no sound of it, no signs of lights or anything.
At night, what can in terms of the night? So you seen it against the night sky. So was it? If it was August, it's probably still quite light at that time.
That's what I'm saying. It was an August summer's night, so it was.
That time of year, it's still kind of lightish at that time. No bother, aye.
So as I say, when I looking in this direction, it was still quite a light sky. You would see we were having a lightning storm.
Aye.
But we're looking into a sky that wasn't pitch black. It wasn't cloudy.
It
wasn't particularly cloudy. So as I say, I'm looking at this dark object, realising that whatever it wasn't coming into the academy playing fields. I thought the best way to get a look at this is to get behind it, and that's to drive out this way towards Blackridge, come back up along the back road. That takes me behind the school, and it was just right here we are just now. As I'm driving along this bit of the road, this same or similar object had came from our right hand side, literally just above the trees, and just slowly came down into the field. I managed to about 100 yards, and just stopped and just sat maybe 15 feet above the ground.
Above the tree lines, or in
well, see this tree line here that we're looking at. Obviously, these trees have grown a few in the year, a few feet in the years. But this tree line that we're looking at now on this back road, this object had just came from, which will be the Whitburn direction, which is for the south, came down straight across the top of these trees, down here, like this. Not known really how to judge the size of it. I would reckon it was about 40 foot long. And when it stopped, as I say, maybe about 100 yards into the field, which is not, as you can see, that's not far from where I was parked just here.
So you're probably looking at like 100 yards or so away from it, or
I was about 100 yards away from this thing. As you see, this thing was about 15 feet off the ground, hovering.
In terms of seeing it, what type of shape would you say it was?
Now that I was as close as I was, I described it as being from the nose of it. It looked like an upside down triangle, and as I say, it was approximately 40 feet long, and it had a nose like a tapered front end.
So was it, if you're looking at a triangle, was it a triangle kind of flat? Or was it turned on its end, or like where was the point of the triangle facing?
The point of the triangle was facing downwards.
Downwards.
Sloped. When I was watching this thing, I was quite, it was quite defined. Quite easily see the shape of it.
Aye.
So as I say, I watched this thing for a good 20 minutes, thinking, well, I'll go and have a look. But no, I'm going to mobile phones the police. Obviously, the police are, they're a wee bit sceptical about what I'm even doing on the phone, talking about UFOs. But I says, look, I'm standing at the side of the road beside my car, and I'm watching something in a field and I don't know what it is. Still thinking to myself, is this something military? Is it, you've just got to think to yourself, I don't want to get too close to this, but at the same time I wanted to know what it was. So
On the description side there, was it? Did you say it was just totally black? Could you discern
pitch
any
black,
ridges, anything like that?
nothing, no sign of anything like lights, porthole windows, anything, nothing at all. There was just no sign of it. It was like it wasn't a glossy black. It was a flat black.
Like a matte black.
Matte black. You could see really well because of the distance I was for this.
Aye.
You could see quite plain the shape of it and the size of it, and
Was it sharp edges, rounded edges?
it was sharp angular thing. As I say, shaped as some have described it as being like an upside down Toblerone.
Was it kind of like if it was like a triangle? Was it like? So basically, if you're saying it was tilted towards the ground, was it kind of sitting like that?
It was
like
sitting,
an angle?
sitting
Or kind of flat?
it was sitting flat to land. There was no sign of any landing gear or anything like that on it. It wasn't making any noises.
What kind of height off the field was it hanging there?
It was about 15 feet off the ground.
15.
Aye, it's about 15 feet off the ground. As I say, I just watched this for a wee while, and I'm thinking, as I say, what can I do? I didn't want to get too close to it, but I wanted to get a better look at it. But I took a halogen, like a work lamp,
Aye.
out the glove box of my car, and I plugged it into the cigarette lighter and I shone it on this thing, and the beam did hit the side of this object, and just at that instant the bulb went on the halogen lamp. I got a wee bit of fright.
Did it blow or did it just?
It just switched off. So see, I got a wee bit of fright at that. I'd had this hand lamp for a lot of years. It was a good work lamp for working when you're working under the bonnet of the car and what have you.
Aye.
I got a bit of fright. I thought, no, I'm not having this. I jumped into the car, and the car was dead. It had no ignition, no side lights, nothing. Everything was off. Going into a panic now, and still waiting for the police. So I phoned them a second time, and it turns out they were on the A89 looking for me, which is the road that runs parallel to this.
The main road between Armadale and
The main road
Blackridge.
between Armadale and Blackridge.
Aye.
They thought I was on that road, and I phoned them. They said, we're looking for you. I said, I'm on the back road between Armadale and Blackridge. And during the call, I spoke to the person on the other end of the phone. I says, I can see them, the blue lights are behind me. And seconds later, the police car pulled up, and I missed the point of this thing taking off.
So you didn't see it take off?
No, I did.
Oh, you did, aye.
But,
Sorry.
so going back to when I shone the lamp on the car, I said this beam definitely hit the side of this object, and at the instant that happened, this thing took off in the same direction, just went in like reverse at high speed, in the very same direction that I saw it coming. It just
Did it turn
shot
around
off.
or just
It didn't
go
turn
back
around,
the way
it just
it
went
went?
backwards. It went in
backwards.
reverse. It didn't rise up slowly then shoot away. It just
So was the point was the
Shot
point
away.
at the front, and then like the square
Point was at
end
the
it
front.
was at the back.
Aye. The point was facing towards Armadale direction,
Aye.
and it just went just back the way it came in reverse. Didn't turn round or anything like that. It just shot away. And there was no engine noise, all you could really hear of it was wind noise. But it took off at a really high rate speed. There was no way you could look at that and think it's some kind of a military aircraft or something, because there was no engine noise, there was no jet.
This is
noise
back
like
in
that.
this is back in '94.
94.
As well.
Aye. So it was at that point I made the second phone call to the police, and as I mentioned earlier, they were on the right road. They were coming behind me. So I suspected they'd probably seen this as well, because they would have been probably just behind us.
Aye.
As this thing took off and shot away. The police pulled up and they were asking me what I'd seen, and I was quite adamant they had seen it as well, but they're like, we never saw a thing. So we were sitting talking about it in the car for just a few minutes, and then police cars started to arrive. There was quite a few police cars arrived, maybe about 4 or 5 police cars arrived, and there was
A few, aye.
there was a few, aye. And what I found a wee bit kind of a suspicious was one of the cops had got to his car and took a traffic cone, and I never spoke to this policeman, and he actually walked out, he got out the car and he walked into the field and he placed the traffic cone in the field at roughly the area where I saw this object. And I thought, how did he know where to put that? Because I never spoke to him. Do you know what I mean? It was just kind of a wee bit unusual. But these police had came from Strathclyde, no Lothian Borders. My phone call had went to Lothian Borders. This was Strathclyde police. And a few minutes later, they sat me in the back of this car, and I don't know if he was an inspector or a sergeant, but he was off duty. He wasn't dressed as a policeman, he was dressed in civilian clothes, he had slippers on. What I was told was they'd got this guy out his bed, and he had came to Armadale to see what was going on. And the policeman in the front of the car had suggested he wanted to breathalyse me, and the sergeant, or whoever it was, had said, I don't think that'll be necessary. And I certainly hadn't been drinking. And they took a statement. I spoke to as I say, I don't know if he was a sergeant or an inspector. I think he was actually a police inspector. He spoke to me for a wee while, more on a personal level about, what I think I'd saw, and he didn't speak to me as if I was some kind of a raving lunatic. You sure you've seen the right thing here? He was quite interested in the, what I was, the story I was telling him. There's obviously nothing else that the police could do because this object was away. So the police cars all went away, and I was left with the police car that came up originally, and it was an officer and a policewoman that arrived. And they had phoned the AA for me. I wasn't a member of the AA, but they had phoned the AA on my behalf because I was stranded. Probably back at 2 o'clock in the morning by this time. And as we were waiting for the AA, we were looking towards, which we can't see it now because of the weather, but we've got the Bathgate House. It's starting to get a wee bit light at this time. We saw this bright orange, what looked like, the this is like the size of a football, coming up off the Bathgate House, and it rose up and went slightly to the right, then back down again. And we all saw it, but the police, like, we never saw a thing. But I said, we're standing here looking at this. But they're like, no, we never saw a thing. So the AA guy arrived. He was about 45 minutes. He arrived and he examined the car, checked out the fuses, checked over the ignition. Couldn't find anything wrong with the car. The police, they were leaving to go to an incident in Bathgate. So the AA guy says, right, we'll get you hooked up and we'll tow you home, which he did. And maybe a mile from where we are just at the minute, my side lights flicked on. So he'd seen this from his mirror, stopped the AA car, came out, checked my car over again, but still in the ignition. Decided there's nothing we can do, we'll just tow you the rest of the way. Towed me back into my house and spoke to the AA guy for a few minutes, checked the car over again, nothing. My concern was my driver's window was down, and I'm going to have to leave the car like that overnight.
Was it electric?
It was electric window, aye. As I say, I was just getting on with it at that time. Everybody was away, and I'm just kind of reflecting on what had went on earlier that night. Aye. And I was in the house looking for a bit of plastic to put in the window, and when I came back, the alarm on my car had chipped. So went over and checked the car, the ignition was on, started the car up, the car was back to normal, the car was absolutely fantastic. Everything was I was happy that my car was okay. And from then on, to be honest with you, Chris, it was just a case of just getting on with it. The following day, when I worked at the time in Scottish Power in Bathgate, when I went to my work the following day, I was getting ribbed with the guys I worked with about this UFO and these wee green men and all the rest of it, but it hit the news that fast. This is the following day. So
and at the time,
it's just getting on with it.
At the time, did you say you wish you'd never said it at the time, or like you getting ribbons and stuff like that? Or?
Well, you get a lot of stick. No, it wasn't. you got the odd one or two people that thought you were actually a raving lunatic and you're needing to get hospital help and all the rest of it. But you know, you can say, listen, see at the end of the day, unless you've seen it, you can't really comment. And some of the guys that I worked with, Scottish Power, you know, they were sitting down and talking to me, say, Andy, I saw something years ago, and I'm convinced I saw a UFO, and you know, but of course you got the odd people who just thought, you know, they probably didn't like it because I was getting a wee bit of attention. But as the days and the weeks went on, my mum and dad were actually in Spain, and it was my dad's birthday on the 31st of August, and they saw it in a newspaper in Spain. So they were on the phone to me going, what's going on here? So we know about this, and we're in Spain. So I started getting phone calls from there was a university in Stirling. Investigators wanted to come and see me, and you know, I thought, oh, this is getting taken quite seriously here. And before you knew it, I was inundated with requests for people that wanted to come and interview me about this. And that was the only regret, that you know, the more involved it became, the more people are looking at you like you're a lunatic. But you just had to take that, because just the way it is with people.
The thing is as well, it's like, it's if more and more people came out with these stories, then it wouldn't be as such a kind of fringe topic. You know what I mean? That's the thing, because there's loads of people out there, as I spoke to you earlier on, with stories that didn't relate them to anybody. You know what I mean? And that's how they go. It's getting more and more accepted as time goes on. You know what I mean? With all the stuff that's happening now. But I know it'd been looked into the story before, and it'd been in a book and stuff like that. It was in the paper and stuff like that. It mentioned like missing time and stuff.
That's
like
right. I was going to come to that. It was actually just it was accidental that through one of the guys that that was investigating this.
Is that Ron Halliday, or is it?
No, it wasn't Ron. It was John Jenkins. I'm sure it was John Jenkins. He's just a paranormal investigator. He's just kind of a freelance guy, piano tuner by trade.
Right.
So we were just talking about things, and he kept going on about this. He'd managed to get a transcript of the recording that went to the police.
Aye.
You know, about this sighting.
Get a FOIA request or something.
Aye.
Like
So I'm still adamant that, you know, the time that I was watching this, because I knew we'd actually left Cowdenbeath Raceway, and I know how long it takes to get back to Armadale, and I know what time I was sitting at the academy watching this thing, and it all happened in a matter of minutes. It's, you know, it's not like it took hours, but they were saying, you know, the time scale between your first phone call and the police arriving, and between your first phone call and your second phone call, there was something like an hour and a half, a discrepancy, and I was like, no, your records have got to be wrong, because it didn't take that long. So John Jenkins had introduced me to a chap he knew that had an incident, Gary Wood.
on the A70.
On the A70, and I spoke to Gary John and Gary a few times when they came out to Armadale to visit me. This was ongoing sort of investigations into, you know, the UFOs and paranormal and things like that. And just through talking to them, I got to know Gary quite well, and he was an ambulance technician. He had a good job, and you know, he's just a happy-go-lucky kind of guy. And he'd been asked to go for this hypnotic regression. And when they started to explain, I'd never heard of it before, but when they started to explain to me what was involved, and they were saying, you know, this could sort of release part of your subconscious memory, and you know, there could be information that you are withholding, that the regression will bring it back out. But after seeing what I think it's done to Gary, because Gary lost his job, and I think a lot of it was down to, he seemed to be dwelling on this regression.
Aye.
You know, it seemed to affect him in such a way that it caused a bit of a problem with his mind. So I thought, if that's what it's done to Gary, I didn't even want to go down that road. On the other hand, I wanted to know what was going on, because I explained to the people that came to visit me that very night when I eventually did get to my bed, which was probably about 3 a.m.
Aye.
I went into a dream and I dreamt the whole sequence over from start to finish. But when I say that I was standing looking at this object for about 20 minutes, in my dream, I actually did walk up to the object and it opened up. A door opened up and I went into this machine. And, you know, I didn't see anybody, I didn't see any wee green men, I didn't see any human beings, I didn't see anything like that. But I described what I saw inside this, what I described then as being a UFO. But I don't want to know if that's real. Is that just purely my imagination because of the event, or is that part of what really could have happened?
It's hard to discern because like in this field people believe it's either your memories have been taken for you or it's your subconscious blanking them out to protect you. And that's kind of one aspect of it as well. But like in the dream, like going back to that, like, what did you see?
Well, when I went inside, because of the shape of this thing, I see an upside down Toblerone with the pointed bit facing the ground, just like a door had opened up in the back, and it was just like, I suppose you could say it was just like walking into the, you know, up the stairway to an aeroplane. And you walk in, I walked into this thing and it was just like a corridor.
Was it stairs or did you?
It was stairs. I walked up. I just walked up steps. So this thing was obviously on the ground. In my dream, this thing was on the ground, and I walked up. This door was open, and I walked up the steps. And it was just a long corridor, probably the length of this machine. And on both sides of me, it was just what looked like banks of coloured lights and switches. And I wouldn't say it was something like you'd see in like a Star Wars movie or, you know, something like that. But it did, you know, it was just all switches and lights. But I was hearing sound which sounded to me like an out of tune radio. You know, the old-fashioned manual tune radio in between channels. It was just static noise. And as I said, never saw anybody. Didn't have any experience of being examined and all the rest of it.
Aye.
Which I've heard stories about this before.
Aye, totally. Aye.
I just and that was the end of the dream.
Aye,
so I didn't have any recollection of being taken away anywhere or anything like that.
And you never ever after that thought about getting regressed or anything?
No.
Just because of the whole point with Gary Wood, and I understand that. Aye.
I had the dream and I told about the dream, and I think that's what made some of the people who were speaking about this try to persuade me that regression would possibly release more information, which, to be honest with you, Chris, I thought that was more for their benefit, because they wanted to, you know, they wanted to investigate this further. They wanted to see what was really going on. Whereas me, after meeting Gary, and in my opinion, I think it screwed up his head a wee bit.
Aye, no, I can understand that. Aye.
I decided, if this is what it's done to Gary, I don't want to experience that. Do you know what I mean?
No, it's totally understandable.
Not for anybody else's sake, but for mine. I just don't want to experience it. And of course, they couldn't make me do it, so I chose not to.
Aye. And
I stuck with that. And even to this day, I've always wondered if I'd have went for the regression, what would have come out it. But I didn't, and I didn't intend to. So.
Did you have any experiences after that? I mean, is there any other experiences from it after it? Did you have?
No, from that, no for that incident. No, I was asked by probably everybody that came to see me. You know, are you into sci-fi? And I mean, I wasn't even when I was growing up. I was never interested in watching anything like that, like Star Wars and you know, all these kind of sci-fi movies. I was never a sci-fi person.
Aye.
So it's not as if it's been in my mind that
aye.
I want to see a UFO and you know, this is what I'm into, because I wasn't, and I'm not. Do you know what I mean? It was an experience that I just happened to. If it wasn't me, it would probably been somebody else. But I've never been into that kind of thing.
Did you have any experiences other than this?
I have actually. I've actually got a couple of things I'll try to find them for you before you came up.
Right, okay.
But two of them have been pretty recent. One was just at the end of this road, standing last year again in the summertime, with my nephew, who was 8 at the time. We were standing in the farm yard, and I was talking to a friend of mine who happens to be a retired Rolls-Royce aero engineer. And we're standing, as I say, at the farm gate, which is on Upper Bathville. And I looked up and I noticed coming from, say, like probably about the Whitburn direction.
Aye.
Like a bright, like a ball-shaped thing that was changing between orange and blue.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is too big to be aircraft.
And this is quite recent.
This is just last year.
Oh,
summer.
is it?
Aye. And I was watching it coming in our direction, which is say from Whitburn direction to Armadale. And I was looking up, and I said to John, I says, look at that. And Stephen, even at 8-year-old, he's looking at that and he said, what is that? So you recognise it as being not normal.
Oh, totally. Aye.
So as it came toward us, up towards above the sort of upper Bathville area, it turned quite sharp, as if it was heading towards Bathgate, down the upper Bathville road. Well, I say this thing that we were looking at, it looked more like the blue and red light was spinning.
Mm-hmm.
No flashing like a strobe light or anything. It was more like it was just a spinning light, and it was quite big. And
What kind of height would you say it was up in the?
Difficult to say, but because we're in a flight path, you're thinking, you know, it's probably the same height as what a plane would be flying at.
Aye.
But it seemed living here and seeing aircraft all the time. You're thinking to yourself, it's an unusual sort of flight path for a plane to be coming down this. But it turned really, really sharp.
Aye.
To head towards Bathgate, but it started to rise up, and it went, because when we were watching this, it was going, you know, at relatively slow speed, but as it turned to go away from us, heading the Bathgate direction, it started to lift up into the sky, really, really rapid, and it just disappeared into the clouds. And I looked at John, as I say, John's a knowledgeable man, he's a really clever old guy, and I was like, what the hell was that, John? And as I say, even an 8-year-old standing there like, what was that? It was quite obvious it wasn't something that was seen every day.
What time of year do you think it was?
I think that would be, I actually think that'd probably be around about the summertime as well. It would been about, I reckon maybe about 7 o'clock at night. It wasn't late on, and it was
And about a year ago, roughly.
probably about a year ago.
Was it during lockdown or was it before lockdown?
No, I would say it was before lockdown. I think it was before lockdown, Christy.
About a year and a half, roughly, then. Something like that.
Eh,
So it was in the summer.
It's terrible, that kind of thing. Aye.
That
I'm
was
trying to
sometime.
think back, because I'm trying to think the time. It wouldn't be late. I know
Aye.
it wouldn't be late, but it was dark. I can show you this on my phone.
Aye.
Right. So it was.
What did
it
you
was
take
getting-
up?
I got a bit of it,
Aye.
but I got a bit on my phone, but I might be able to go back at my phone and I'll have a date on it or something like that.
Aye. Okay.
I've also got on my phone something that we recorded maybe a fortnight, 3 weeks ago in Motherwell, and I know other people were watching this as well, because we could see people looking up and pointing at this thing in the sky, and there's like 4 vapour trails beneath sign aircraft.
Ah, right.
And I've got that on my phone as well. I've got 2 photographs of it, but they're just photographs. As we were watching this, you know, you see a vapour trail, you think nothing of it.
Aye.
Stephen well, he's 9 now, but Stephen at that age
So it was
is
4 vapour trails, aye.
4 vapour
Like,
trails.
so it was something together, aye.
I'll show you the
was it
pictures of
separate,
them. They were they're perfectly straight. So that whatever this was travelling at a really good speed.
Aye.
You know when you see a vapour trail, it breaks up pretty quick.
Aye.
These are perfectly straight, and the 4 of them. But the fact that other folk were looking at them was because we were aware of other people looking. And
if
to see
you're
a
in
vapour
Motherwell-
trail, you never look at that.
If you're in Motherwell, kind of what direction? If you go where your Motherwell, I do know Motherwell area. Just stay in Motherwell for a wee while. What can I do? If you're in Motherwell, you're looking. If you take the 74 as a guide.
Aye, you'd be heading south.
Aye.
So
Okay.
so that's that's vapour trail was actually heading north, because we'd turned down.
Aye.
So in relation to the direction I was travelling to, the area I was going, we were coming back. So this vapour trail would have been heading north.
Aye. Ah, right. Okay.
So I don't even know if you'll recognise it on the photograph, the area we were in, but I couldn't even.
But you're in a decent spot where you are. I mean, where you stay. I mean, to see some, like, it's going to get a nice sky and stuff like that as well. You're up there.
Well, this is a, I don't know if I would call it a hot spot, but just at the West Craigs Road at the time of my sighting, they had been investigating a sighting from a woman and the daughter. Unfortunately for them, probably, but when they were coming back to me, they never gave any names or detail of the the investigation, but they came back and says, well, we think she was drunk. So that I think the investigators looked at that and thought it's not very credible. When I still have letters. I don't know if you've seen some of them, Chris, but some of the stuff that's actually been published is of no defence significance or something like that. But I've got letters from I've got more than one letter for the Ministry of Defence explaining, what was happening that night, including 2 fighter jets that were in the area. But everybody knows a fighter jet when it passes them. You get a fright. You know it's a fighter jet. And this is some of the comments that was getting. One of the comments that was made for the Ministry of Defence was that it wasn't. I can't remember the exact wording, but it wasn't of any significance. It wasn't a security. It wasn't a security threat, so they're not willing to investigate it. And the second letter that came in,
which is mental. I mean, as well. You know what I mean? Because it's
they obviously didn't want to open up to anything and say, oh well, we did have word that there was something in the air that night. They just turned it around and say it was a jet. Do you know what I mean? Or it was cloud formation or something like that. But you have, as I said earlier, when I was getting a wee bit of the ribbon for some of my pals at work, you've got to see it to comment. I mean, if you've never really seen it up close, and as I said, I'd never believed really that there was a definite UFO. But having seen what I saw way back as many years ago as that, unless the government, the military's got something up their sleeve that we don't know about, then there's got to be. There's got to be.
One of the things I'd seen, and it's probably you're looking maybe about 5. The Leylock's about 5 miles that way, right? So I'm just like in the same kind of area, a bit further up. We'd only seen it was the size of satellite. If you look up, you see satellites and stuff like that. I mean, a bit brighter, a wee bit faster, but you can still discern it as a satellite. And we jokingly said it was coming towards like another kind of brighter star, just going to pass through it. And we jokingly said it must have been. I'm trying to think of the date. I was only 18 at the time. We're just doing camping, fishing and stuff like that. Travelling through just one horizon to the other, and it came to this kind of star. We said the one that was going to do was going to hit that star. And it did a 90-degree turn, like without dropping speed, without arcing. As soon as it got to pass that star, it just like an L shape. You know what I mean? Totally 90-degree turn. And it kept going. Nothing can do that. You know
exactly.
What I mean?
You know that.
Can do that. I know that. It's like satellite's not going to do that. A plane can't do that. You can't. There was no arc or nothing. It was just it was a 90-degree turn. And we watched it until it just went out the horizon line and disappeared. With that, you know what I mean. But there's been this whole area. You know what I mean. There's been loads of kind of sightings and stuff like that. We didn't really obviously things that happened in Falkirk and stuff.
That's right. I've heard of that for these people who when you get professors and some of the country's top psychologists and this that come to see you, think, well, they're taking this serious. Why? Why me? I mean, you hear folk talking about UFO sightings, and I saw this, I saw that, and you pass it off as well. Did you? But the amount of attention I thought, they're treating this really serious, and the fact that the police, when they arrived that night, seemed to know something before I even spoke to them. And this, as I said, this off-duty sergeant, inspector or whatever, it's like they knew something was going on. And then when I made the call, they thought, right, let's go into this.
I always thought it was one of the most prominent cases. Like I've heard it. I mean, because
my one.
Aye.
Well,
because of the fact that credible witness. See what you've seen. I mean, the police been involved in all that kind of stuff as well, and even like the evidence in the car and that, like the car no starting. I thought it was like one of the most prominent cases.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The AA, I don't know if it was I don't know, I wouldn't say it was a marketing thing, but it just, I think the AA, for whatever reason, they wanted to come back and see me. It was a good 2 months later. They wanted to send somebody out. They wanted to send one of their top engineers out to examine the car issues. They're more than welcome, and they did. They sent a guy out to examine the car. They weren't asking questions about the UFO sighting, although they mentioned it, but they weren't dwelling on that. They wanted to examine the car. See if there was any kind of tampering going on or something like that. But they sent a guy out from the AA and they examined the car. It was I think it was about a 1981 Audi Coupe GT. So nothing special. And they examined the car and they actually made a report, you know, a proper official report ordering
Aye.
writing this. And I got a copy of the report and it came back that they couldn't find anything faulty
Aye.
with the car's system.
Aye.
And it suggested that there's a possibility that if I had driven past or through an electrical field, like under the pylons, it could possibly drain the power.
Aye.
Which is pretty unheard of, but I suppose if they say that can happen, then that can happen. But of course, you're in the location with me, Chris, today. When this all happened, there's nothing to be seen.
Aye. There's nothing here.
There's nothing here. There's no pylons here, so they can't put it into that. Do you know what I mean? So they could never understand if there was some kind of a power surge that would take all the power off the battery, and at the same time, why is when we kind of left the area did the power start to come back?
Aye, like, you heard it before
Yeah.
in a lot of other cases. If you've looked at other cases, I take it you probably have. I mean, where you get this happening with the cars while they start, and then they'll just start on their own again. And coming for like obviously you worked with Scottish Power, so you know the electricity and the way it works and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So it's funny to see if it's dead then and it just kind of restarts again.
If their suggestion was if you've been near a high energy field like underneath electric pylons and as I said earlier, which we're not.
Aye.
So you wonder to yourself, this machine that I was standing watching, it's got to be powered with something. I did joke because when they said to me, "Why do you think it would have been here?" I joked because we're standing next to an old spoil bin. They were doing nicking the coal off the bank to power their machine.
Aye.
I just joked about it, but of course this machine has got to be powered with something. And if it has such a high energy to power it, could that have been the energy that drained the power off my car? I don't know. But that was an explanation or a possible solution to what they were trying to find is why did it lose its energy? Why did the battery completely drain? And they're saying that could have been the reason for it. It could be a high energy field. So is that something to do with this machine?
No, totally. I mean, it's all totally interesting. You know what I mean? It's like one of the most cases that's fascinated. One of the factors as well, because I stayed in the corner for you. You know what I mean? I'd since moved at that point. I stayed in Motherwell and moved there, and I came back. But did you ever have any experiences before?
No.
Before that point?
No, to be honest with you, never. See, I was never into it. I was never into sci-fi and the rest of it. Never took any interest in it. Never had any. I mean, I must have been 19, 20 year old or something at the time. I think I can't quite remember.
When you heard about it before, like the first time, like I thought you were totally credible. You know what I mean? And you can hear it.
Well,
and that's it as well.
Nice to hear that because you see a lot of folk didn't, but that's you make up your own mind as to why these people are behaving like that. You say, well, you know, as I mentioned when I was getting most of the idiots that I was getting making negative comments were people that I worked beside at Scottish Power. But again, the majority of people that I was working with, they were, you know, they were interested. It was, I think a lot of it today was they realised I was getting a lot of attention. I had time off my work. You know, I don't know if you've what research you've done, but I mean, I had TV companies were flying about here in helicopters filming all this. Yeah, I was on the.
I can mind it's Strange But True.
Strange But True. I've never watched it.
You never watched it, though.
Not for any other reason. I've just never watched it. But
very rare evidence for like people like no one to claim to fame, not even watching it.
Well, as I said, that twice we had film companies up here with helicopters, using helicopters for doing the filming. So twice I took part in making a kind of documentary film about it.
Did the investigators at the time did they look at flight data and stuff like that, to see if it was caught in any radars or anything?
Well, as I said, one of the I'm not exactly sure who it was that done the investigation, but one of them had came back, and they had this information had been gotten for the Ministry of Defence, saying there was two jets in the air at that time. So they've obviously done that. You know, done that bit of research, but I dismissed that right away when I read the report. Kind of you kind of get that you get that kind of it annoys you because you think, well, that's not true. You know, they've came back and says, oh, they're dismissing that off as, oh, what I actually saw was a couple of fighter jets. It wasn't fighter jets.
Fighter jets.
Fighter jets in this area
they'll be gone in a second. You know what I mean? And
They
the
don't
noise they
behave that.
create as well.
Aye, well, everybody been talking about fighter jets at that time in the morning. What we're up to in this area.
It's not a
Fighter
place you
jets
really
don't
see
behave
fight-
like that.
You didn't really see fighter jets out here. You know what I mean?
No,
Especially
really.
flying round where you've got an airport, like 15, 20 miles away.
Edinburgh, aye.
You're not going to fighter jets flying about here.
Well, they're not going to be landing, and at the same time, as I say, when you see this kind of thing, you know that's
At
not
that
fighter.
time of night, and during a literal storm,
Aye.
next to an airport.
There's no way that was fighter jets, so it does annoy you a wee bit when you see that kind of a report. I think, to be honest with you, most of the reports that I saw, I was quite happy with them, but there was just one or two that it's like, well, if they want to dismiss it, they can dismiss it, but I know what I saw.
Times are changing though, you know what I mean? It's like, I think with a lot of stuff it's come out recently, you know what I mean, for 2017, and there's a lot of new stuff. I don't know how much now you follow the subject after you're
I don't.
like,
not
you
at all.
didn't follow it, no.
No.
There's quite a lot of stuff, new revelations that came out in the US and all that. I mean, they've come out and said that they're now admitting there's stuff in the sky that they don't know what there is. They chase them, you know what I mean? They've got gun camera footage and stuff like that. There's like Congress hearings going to happen this year as well. They're trying to get all the stuff for security services in America on all the like UFO reports and stuff that they're trying.
Well, you see a bit of that. You see a bit of that on the. Sometimes read these things that's coming for the space station, and the NASA are covering up. These camera footage where somebody's picked something up, and they're obviously told not to discuss it, and they're obviously switching the cameras off so we can't get a chance to see it. I don't know, really. It's not because of what I saw, but I do believe we're not the only people in this.
Aye, definitely.
There's got to be more to this than just us. But I think, personally, we're not a master race.
Oh, totally not.
Do you know what I mean? There's far better technology out there than what we've got. But I don't think I personally don't think they'll ever disclose it, even though I think they know there is.
The now since a lot of stuff that's happened, a lot of people they say now this is one of the most prevalent times in the UFO community and stuff, because they think it's a soft disclosure. There is stuff happening since that what happened in 2017. You don't know if you know the case or not, but there was like UFOs following basically like a carrier fleet, ships and stuff like that, doing manoeuvres off the coast of California and stuff. And they got gun camera footage, they chased it, fighter jets chased it, stuff like that. And then they eventually, that was 2004, they released the video in 2017. And then it took a wee while, and then it was only in 2019 the Navy came out and says, right, we do see these things, we don't know what they are. And then now there's been guys involved in basically projects within the Pentagon that came out, and then it's getting kind of blown wide open now a wee bit. You know what I mean? It is like the mace thing. There's been things happen before in the past where like, people think it's got some disclosure, but now this, it seems to be there is stuff happening. You know what I mean? But I'll believe it when I see it though. You know what I mean? The actual disclosure.
Don't follow it, but sometimes you do. You look into some of these things that you look on YouTube. I just look at it maybe just to pass an hour before I go to bed, and you look at it and you think, well, will they ever disclose it? But you also get these things with people saying, you know, if they did disclose it, it's got to change everything. It's got to change religion and everything.
That'll change everything. Aye.
So, can people handle that?
I think maybe now. I think maybe going back like 20, 30 years ago, maybe even more than that. I mean, but I think now.
I don't go looking for it. I'm not constantly looking up at the night sky, but
Aye.
you know, when you see something that's a wee bit more unusual, you tend to notice it.
Aye.
And you tend to kind of focus on it more.
Totally, aye.
And since the sighting I had, I've saw 2 or 3 other, you know, instances where things have clocked onto something, and I thought, you know, what is that?
Aye.
But I'm not going to go phoning people and saying I want you to investigate.
No, obviously. Aye.
Do you know what I mean? It's maybe something that I think would be worthy of being investigated, but
No,
unless you've got really good quality pictures or good, like you see, good
It's hard to
credible
get.
witnesses in this, it's hard.
The thing is, it's hard to get pictures unless it's like during the day and it's like up close. I mean, because most of the time it's lights in the sky. You know what I mean? And it's hard unless you're there and you've seen it and you've seen the manoeuvring there or whatever else. You know it's nothing. It's not normal. You know what I mean? But in that aspect, I mean, it's hard unless you see stuff. You know what I mean?
Although it's been a lot of years that's passed since that incident, I've still got occasionally I'll get a letter, which I find that's quite difficult to believe, because they've managed to track me down. I've changed my address twice since that incident, but they've managed to get a hold of me, and they've said we're going to be publishing a book. Do you mind if we publish our story?
Aye.
So even now, I'm like yourself when you first contacted me as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's even after all the years has passed, 94. That incident of mine is still.
Oh, totally. That's what I'm saying, because
Still being brought up.
it's such a strong case. You know what I mean? And just with the sighting and the police involved and everything like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what it is about here. You know what I mean? There's that many. There's probably stuff happens everywhere, but it's just down to the fact that I don't know what it is. West Lothian, Falkirk, all that kind of stuff. You do get all that kind of stuff happening, sightings and stuff like that. But my plan is, I always want to get more stories out there, regardless of it being, obviously it's been covered before and stuff. And I'm hoping that spurs more people to come out and with their stories, and it's just getting them told. You know what I mean? And in that aspect, you know what I mean? But
well, I wonder if some people feel the same way as I did and think, well, I'm ridiculing or this.
Probably,
well,
aye. It's understandable.
It depends on on an individual and how strong they are, because see, when I got the phone call from mum and dad, we just laughed about it.
Aye.
But they were like, I'm the youngest of three, and they were talking about, it's like, you wouldn't make this kind of thing up.
Aye.
And they said they were phoning me from Spain, because they'd read it in a newspaper. I think they read it in the Daily Record or something in Spain. And it's like, you wouldn't make this up. Do you know what I mean? So I think if you've got quite a strong-minded person, they would come up and say, look, I've got a story to tell.
Aye.
But I think the people who really just didn't want to be ridiculed, or they maybe just didn't want the neighbours laughing at them behind their back and that kind of thing, pointing the finger, that's where I think a lot of people would just say, I've just got to keep this to myself.
Aye.
You know what I mean?
I can understand.
I have no idea, honestly, Chris, I have no idea how that story came about, because you see, I was in I made a wee mistake there. That was on the Saturday night, Sunday morning, but by Monday, when I went back to my work, that story was it. It wasn't the phone day, it was actually the Saturday night, Sunday morning when the incident took place. But on the Monday morning when I went to my work,
It was that quick.
it was that quick. But somebody had said to me that some of even the Lothian courier would maybe phone the police station. I don't think the police station, have you got anything?
Aye, for stories and stuff like that. It does happen, aye.
And if that's how it happened, then they'll say, oh well, we've got this story about this UFO sign, and there you go. It all came out, but I have no idea how it came out so quick.
And at that time, there was sightings about that time as well, and in the 90s, and I mean, there was a good few.
It got a lot of interest. I was really surprised at how much interest it showed, because you see, I stayed in Mayfield Drive at the time.
Aye.
No, sorry, I didn't stay in Mayfield Drive at the time. I stayed in Avondale Drive at the time. But a couple of years later, when I was staying in Mayfield, when they came to film at my house, the street was full of these vans, and they had these film crews were all in my house setting this thing up for filming and stuff. The neighbours were like, "What's this about?" This is something that happened 2 years ago.
Aye.
But it's just people still talk about it.
Oh, totally, aye.
So
No, definitely, there's something there, but well, listen, thanks very much for your time.
You're welcome,
and
Chris.
it's such a good, interesting story, and I'll certainly send you the links. I'd like to send you a link to some other stuff that's happening now. You know what I mean?
Sure.
If you're interested in looking at it, you know what I mean? For the stuff that's talking about disclosure and that, but I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in the last number of years, the last couple of years anyway. It's been the most time that stuff's happened, so it's interesting to get your kind of thoughts on that as well. But I mean, thanks very much.
You're very
Cheers,
welcome.
thanks for meeting me.